Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something to start. What separates a strong man from a destructive man? It's not his strength, it's not his ambition, it's his restraint. You see, power without control is chaos. A man who doesn't know what to hold back will wreak havoc on his own life and the lives of those around him. Today I want to talk about 3 things every man must learn to hold back. Not because these things are inherently bad, but because they are dangerous if left unchecked. A man who cannot control himself is not free. He's a slave to his impulses. But the man who disciplines himself, who learns the art of restraint, is someone who can harness his potential and walk the razor's edge between order and chaos. True strength is not simply about physical power, brute force, or the ability to dominate others. It is about mastery over oneself. A man who lacks restraint may seem powerful in the short term, but without control over his impulses, he is ultimately vulnerable to self-destruction. Restraint is the mark of a person who understands that unchecked power, whether it comes in the form of anger, words, or desires, leads to chaos. Not just externally, but internally as well. When you think about it, the most dangerous people in history are often those who could not hold themselves back. They allowed their emotions, their need for control, or their unchecked desires to spiral out of control, leaving destruction in their wake. But this principle doesn't just apply on a grand historical scale. It applies to everyday life. In personal relationships, for example, a man who cannot restrain his anger or impulses may lash out at his partner or children, causing deep wounds that take years to heal. In the workplace, a man who speaks impulsively or acts rashly in the pursuit of success might burn bridges, lose credibility, or fail to see the bigger picture. Restraint doesn't mean suppression. Suppressing your emotions or impulses entirely only leads to frustration and eventually an inevitable breakdown. Instead, restraint involves consciously deciding when, how, and why to act. It's about understanding that not every feeling requires immediate expression, not every urge requires indulgence, and not every situation requires you to assert your power. Strength is shown when a man can hold back, even when he feels justified in unleashing his power, anger, or words. A restrained man channels his energy constructively. He knows when to step forward and when to step back. He understands that the long-term consequences of his actions matter far more than any immediate sense of gratification. Restraint creates space for reflection, wisdom, and intentionality. It allows you to think about what truly matters and act accordingly, rather than being driven by fleeting impulses. Ultimately, restraint is not about limiting yourself, but about giving yourself the freedom to choose your actions wisely. It is a hallmark of true strength, a power that isn't chaotic or uncontrolled, but focused and intentional. That is the type of strength that builds instead of destroys. Anger is one of the most primal and powerful emotions humans experience. It arises as a response to frustration, injustice, or a perceived threat, and in its raw form, it can feel overwhelming and uncontrollable. For many men, anger becomes a defining emotion, one that is either unleashed recklessly or buried deep within. However, neither approach serves a meaningful purpose. Unchecked anger destroys relationships, reputations, and even self-respect, while suppressed anger festers and poisons a man from the inside. The solution lies not in denying anger, but in learning to transform it into something productive and purposeful. When anger takes over, it clouds judgment and narrows perspective. In those moments, a man might lash out, saying or doing things that bring immediate relief, but cause long-term damage. This impulsivity can turn anger into a weapon rather than a tool. Yet anger, when understood and controlled, has immense potential. It signals that something isn't right, that something needs to change. If harnessed properly, it can serve as a motivator to correct an injustice, overcome adversity, or stand up for what is meaningful. The process begins with self-awareness. A man must learn to recognize when he is angry and, more importantly, understand why. Is the anger coming from a place of genuine wrongdoing, or is it rooted in pride, insecurity, or frustration? Identifying the source allows for a more measured response. Instead of reacting impulsively, a man can take a step back, breathe, and approach the situation with clarity. This restraint doesn't mean ignoring the anger, but using it as fuel to address the problem effectively and constructively. Controlled anger becomes a force of strength and leadership. It empowers a man to set boundaries, defend himself or others, and challenge the status quo, all without becoming destructive. For example, instead of yelling at a colleague who made a mistake, channeling that frustration into a calm but firm conversation can lead to resolution and growth. In relationships, transforming anger into vulnerability and communication can prevent unnecessary conflict while fostering trust and understanding. Ultimately, anger is neither good nor bad. It is neutral energy. What defines its impact is how a man chooses to handle it. When anger is tempered by reason and discipline, it becomes a tool for change, progress, and justice rather than a force of destruction. Words are among the most powerful tools at a man's disposal. They can build bridges, heal wounds, and inspire greatness, but they can also destroy relationships, create division, and inflict lasting harm. The ability to control one's words is not only a sign of wisdom, but also a demonstration of strength and maturity. Speaking without thought or restraint often leads to regret, while measured speech fosters clarity, trust, and respect. In the heat of the moment, it can be tempting to say whatever comes to mind. Whether fueled by anger, frustration, or the need to prove a point, impulsive words often do more harm than good. Once spoken, words cannot be taken back. They linger in the minds of others, shaping their perceptions and often leaving scars that can take years to heal. A careless remark during an argument, for example, can irreparably damage a relationship, even if the intention wasn't malicious. The first step in controlling one's words is understanding their weight. Words are not merely sounds or symbols. They carry meaning, emotion, and intent. They have the power to influence how others feel and how they respond. Recognizing this power helps a man pause before speaking, allowing him to consider whether his words will contribute to the situation or escalate it. Silence, in many cases, is not weakness, but wisdom. Choosing to listen instead of speaking impulsively often reveals insights that would have otherwise been missed. Equally important is the intention behind one's words. Speaking out of anger or pride often results in defensiveness or conflict, while speaking with purpose and understanding fosters connection and resolution. For example, addressing a problem calmly and constructively rather than resorting to insults or accusations demonstrates self-restraint and emotional intelligence. Mastering the art of holding back in speech doesn't mean suppressing one's voice or avoiding confrontation. It means choosing the right words at the right time with the right intent. This restraint creates opportunities for meaningful dialogue and helps build stronger, more trusting relationships. Ultimately, the control of one's words is a reflection of self-restraint. A man who speaks thoughtfully and deliberately commands respect and influence, not because he dominates the conversation, but because his words carry weight. The ability to hold back impulsive speech is not just a skill, it is a virtue that defines a man's character. The pursuit of immediate gratification is one of the greatest challenges. Everything around us is designed to cater to our desires as quickly and effortlessly as possible. Food, entertainment, comfort, and even success seem just a click away. But this constant indulgence in instant rewards comes at a cost. It weakens discipline, erodes patience, and distracts from the pursuit of goals that hold deeper meaning and long-term fulfillment. And the ability to resist the pull of immediate gratification is not a denial of pleasure, but a redirection towards something far more significant. Immediate gratification often appeals to the most primitive parts of our psyche. It promises quick relief from discomfort or a burst of fleeting pleasure. But like a fire that burns too quickly, it fades just as fast, leaving behind a sense of emptiness or regret. A man who chases every impulse, whether it's overindulging in food, seeking validation through social media, or avoiding hard work in favor of shortcuts, becomes a slave to his desires. He sacrifices the future he could build for the fleeting satisfaction of the moment. Delaying gratification, on the other hand, is a mark of maturity and strength. It requires a man to look beyond the present and consider the long-term consequences of his choices. It's about understanding that the most meaningful achievements in life, whether they involve personal growth, career success, or fulfilling relationships, require time, effort, and sacrifice. The ability to hold back from what is easy and immediate creates space for persistence and focus, which are essential for real accomplishment. This principle is evident in every aspect of life. Think of the man who saves and invests money instead of spending recklessly, or the man who commits to daily discipline in his craft rather than chasing shortcuts. Over time, these choices compound, leading to success and satisfaction that instant gratification could never provide. Even in personal relationships, delaying the urge to act impulsively, whether in anger, neediness, or desire, allows trust and depth to develop in a meaningful way. Resisting immediate gratification is not about rejecting pleasure altogether. It's about prioritizing what is meaningful over what is expedient. It's about building a life that isn't driven by momentary impulses, but by purpose and vision. The man who masters this balance gains not only control over his desires, but the freedom to pursue a life of lasting fulfillment and success. Restraint is often misunderstood as weakness, as if holding back is synonymous with hesitancy or a lack of strength. In truth, the ability to restrain oneself is one of the highest forms of power. It is not about being passive or avoiding action. It's about having the discipline and wisdom to control one's impulses and emotions so they can be channeled effectively. A man who practices restraint demonstrates strength that is deliberate, focused, and purposeful, rather than chaotic and uncontrolled. True power lies in the ability to act with intention, even in moments when emotions or desires demand an immediate response. It's easy to lash out in anger, to indulge in a moment of weakness, or to act on every impulse. These reactions require no effort or discipline, but restraint takes effort. It requires a man to pause, reflect, and choose his response carefully. This kind of self-restraint is not weakness. It is mastery. Restraint also allows a man to maintain his integrity. In a moment of conflict, for example, it may feel satisfying to dominate or humiliate another person, but while such actions might bring short-term gratification, they often erode trust, respect, and relationships in the long term. A restrained man, on the other hand, holds back not because he lacks power, but because he understands the weight of his actions. He knows that true strength lies in building rather than destroying, in maintaining dignity and treating others with respect, even when emotions run high. In addition to preserving relationships, restraint creates space for better decision-making. Acting impulsively often leads to mistakes and regret, while holding back allows a man to assess the situation, consider the consequences, and respond in a way that aligns with his values and goals. This kind of deliberate action leads to outcomes that are not only more effective, but also more meaningful. Restraint is not about denying one's emotions, desires, or power. It is about mastering them. A man who practices restraint is not a man who is weak, is a man who is in control. This kind of control is not restrictive, but liberating. It frees a man from being ruled by his impulses and allows him to act with clarity, purpose, and strength. And that is true power. Power under control. Mastery of oneself is the foundation of true leadership. A man who cannot control his impulses, emotions, or desires cannot hope to lead others effectively. Without self-mastery, he becomes reactive, inconsistent, and unreliable. A man swept away by external forces instead of someone who can stand firm against the tide. In contrast, a man who develops discipline and self-control becomes a stabilizing presence for those around him. His ability to manage himself enables him to guide others with clarity, confidence, and purpose. The process of self-mastery begins with recognizing that the greatest battles a man faces are often internal. Anger, fear, insecurity, and impulsive desires are natural parts of the human experience, but allowing them to dictate one's actions leads to chaos and regret. Action management needs to be an unconventional lesson in the American soul. We proclaim independence, but in reality, we betray it. A man who learns to confront these emotions, understand them, and channel them constructively becomes someone who is not only in control of himself, but also someone others look to in times of uncertainty. People are drawn to stability, and a man who can remain calm, deliberate, and composed under pressure naturally becomes a leader in any situation. Self-mastery is not about perfection. It's about progress. A man striving to improve himself inspires others to do the same. His discipline and restraint set an example, showing that leadership is not about domination, but about service. A leader who has mastered himself is not focused on controlling others. He is focused on guiding them He leads by demonstrating the virtues of patience, courage, and resilience, which come from his ability to govern his own thoughts and actions. In relationships, whether personal or professional, self-mastery fosters trust. A man who can control his words, temper his emotions, and prioritize long-term goals over short-term impulses earns the respect of those around him. People feel safe in his presence because they know he will act with integrity and thoughtfulness. This stability allows him to build stronger connections, resolve conflicts effectively, and inspire cooperation rather than division. Ultimately, the mastery of self is the gateway to leadership because it reflects strength that comes from within. A man who has conquered his inner storms becomes a source of strength for others, providing guidance and stability in a world full of uncertainty. By mastering himself, he not only shapes his own destiny, but also becomes a beacon for those seeking direction, purpose, and hope.